Hey everyone, welcome to Sociastrology. Today we are going to look at the year 2025 on a personal level. We're going to look at this from the context of your rising or sun signs to see how this year is going to play out for you personally. So we're going to go through the major transits for the year to decipher the most important factors for you. So we're going to look at Pluto in Aquarius, which has just permanently moved in November, and look at how that's going to play into the fact that Neptune, Uranus, and Saturn are all changing signs this year. So they're going to be in different houses in your chart than they have been for ages. And then we also will look at Jupiter and its ingress into Cancer to look at where that benefit and luck, goodwill is coming through for you next year. And we will also look at this big epic Mars retrograde process that we have just started going through and will be playing out for the whole first half of the year. And then we will look at the nodal axis and its sign change into Pisces and Virgo to see how the eclipses are likely to play out for you, with eclipses in Pisces, Virgo, and Aries within the context of your own personal chart. So this should play out. This should work perfectly for your rising sign. It could probably also hold for your sun sign as well, but also for a detailed description of what to expect in the coming year, do feel free to book a personal reading. What I do is I look at your natal chart, I go deeply into all of that, but then I use a lot of different timing techniques to see which eclipses are most likely to play out in a very poignant way for people. Whether or not their zodiacal releasing indicates that certain alignments are likely to play out and manifest in a specific way or not, and all of the transits to your own personal planets and so forth. So to really dig into this, I definitely recommend a personal reading, but this should hold really perfectly for your rising sign, and it will probably also apply for your sun sign as well. Additionally, for a mundane astrology general overview of the coming year, politically, historically, socially, I just published last week a really epically long video about that. So if you have the time and you are interested in how this year is also likely to play out on the world stage, I recommend checking that out too. And other than that, if you are new here, do please consider subscribing for future videos. I do topics like this, so the mundane astrology on the one hand, and then I tend to look at the exact same alignment or time frames from a personal standpoint and take it through all of the signs. So if that's something that is of interest to you, then do please feel free to subscribe. I would love to have you here for future videos. And if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, I would greatly appreciate that. It helps the video to spread around. It helps the channel to grow. So I am deeply, deeply grateful for all of that. And without any further ado, let's get into your reading. For Scorpio, we have Pluto is in your fourth house. We have Saturn and Neptune moving into your sixth house. And we have Uranus moving into your eighth house here. So Pluto represents transformation, power dynamics, regeneration, deep challenges that have a great impact on us and our development. So you could be seeing that play out within the context of your home or your family, your roots, possibly looking more into your roots. But this could be needing to take care of, say, a family member or issues that arise in the home, be they physical or conflictual. And there could even be, if you have not been very close to certain members of your family, there could be a regeneration of those relationships where those are deepening as well. Now, with Saturn and Neptune moving into your sixth, Saturn and Neptune are relatively contrary energies, but they do have some overlap. So Saturn tends to be very reserved in its action. It tends to take a very long view. It can be pretty cautious and require a lot of hard work toward some specific goal. Neptune, on the other hand, is very idealistic. It can be very romanticizing of matters. It can cause some confusion, even delusion, even deception. It's also very spiritual and compassionate by nature. So, the ways in which these two kind of overlap as archetypes, the way that we'll be experiencing them in the coming year or so, will be along the lines of sacrifice, making a sacrifice for a greater cause or for something that we see as greater than us. Additionally, the two of these together are quite wise. They represent a very deep well of knowledge and acting based upon that, acting based upon deep-seated values. So these energies are playing out in your sixth house of tasks and chores, errands, work, jobs, your daily routine, your health, things like this. And so it's bringing a greater wisdom and understanding along those lines, but also feeling a frustrated sense of being up in the air. So the thing is, Saturn's going to be quite uncomfortable with a lot of what Neptune is doing here. Saturn really wants to nail things down, whereas Neptune simply doesn't do that. It leads by feeling and it experiences through feeling. So it's very intuitive. That is something that you can rely on in the context of your work and your daily routine and so forth, is getting an intuitive sense and a knowing that is based on your own personal experience, but also that gut feeling. Now, the two of these together can also dissolve things. So you may find that there is a change within your working context, or if you run a business, a change with regard to your employees. And you'll likely find that you're needing to put a lot more work into this area of your life, which is work, which I know sounds annoying. But to add to that, things still aren't going to be, despite all the work that you put in, things still probably won't be very clear because of the fact that Neptune is here too. So I would not shy away from the effort, not shy away from the work, not shy away from doing things in a very idealistic, I really want for this to be done correctly, and I want for that to reflect well on me. I would act in accordance with that kind of an attitude, because Neptune can actually lead us again through that feeling to opportunities that we otherwise might not see. So the thing is, this doesn't just have to be a negative influence. This can be just very pragmatic and like, look, there's something that is an opportunity that's really good for you. You're going to need to put in effort and you're going to need to follow your gut. And then you could get something that's actually really big out of the efforts that you're putting in. So it's not that it's going to go unrewarded. It's just that it's not going to be 100% clear day in and day out why it is that you're feeling the need to put in such clean effort like all the time. There is a purpose to it. It's just that it won't show up tangibly until it does. And you'll be happy that you put the effort in once that does happen. Now, you also have Uranus moving into your 8th house. And Uranus has to do with change foremost. It can also bring a lot of fascination to the area it's transiting. But the extent to which it represents change, this can even take extreme forms in the sense of upheaval or sense of chaotic energy, changes that happen really suddenly where you might be caught quite off guard by them. And this is taking place within the context of your 8th house of other people's resources, joint ventures, contracts, commitments, the dynamics of very close, intimate relationships, as well as psychological material. In the 8th house, for the most part, along the lines of fears And again, those power dynamics with other people. So there could be some shocks along those lines in the coming years, but it's likely to bring a lot of enlightenment to you along these lines as well. There could be some surprising lessons with regard to this, but I would also say with Pluto in your fourth and Uranus in your eighth, I would be cautious to jump into a housing agreement with someone else. So I would make sure that your terms are super clear in any sort of contracts that you have with regard to your home, because there can be a sense of that having some power over you with this kind of an alignment here. But really, any sort of contract that you're signing with other people, it's not all bad. Uranus isn't just a bad planet, but there's likely to be surprises along those lines. So I wouldn't just expect for things to go the way that you're expecting them to. So just kind of keep that in mind and try and make your decisions with that in the back of your mind there as well. So yeah, we can have with this alignment as well, shocks and transformation, or the end even of certain relationships, due probably to power dynamics if something is ending, but shocks and transformation along the lines of your closest relationships and people who have a major impact on your life. There's likely to be surprising changes along those lines. Again, it doesn't have to be a severing. This could even be meeting someone along those lines too. But I would, with these two, I would not be surprised, I have to say it, to see some manipulation within the context of relationships. So that is something I would watch out for a bit. And yes, Pluto in the fourth, issues with family and home that require your attention, that require engagement from you. Pluto really needs to be dealt with when it comes up. And this will be here for about 20 years. It's going to come at different times where you're having to deal with it, especially if you have any placements here or around that are getting hit up by this Pluto. It's likely to time around those exact transits to placements in your chart. But when it comes up, it definitely needs to be dealt with. And there could also be something that comes through along the lines of inheritance or needing to deal with a will, even if there's not an inheritance that is involved with that, but needing to deal with contract, property, wills, things like this. And along the lines of Saturn and Neptune in your sixth, again, effort required within the context of your daily routine. But I would also recommend trying to bring some creative works into your daily routine as well to kind of lighten it up a little bit, give Neptune something to work with, basically. I think that will add to your routine something to engage with enjoyably so that it doesn't just feel like it's a lot of work, it's a lot of effort. And speaking of creative works, in fact, these two together, if you are learning a skill, these can be very helpful to that end, especially if there is any sort of creative dimension to it with Neptune here. I'm thinking most especially music, but any creative works are, your skills are likely to receive a huge, huge, huge boon along these lines with these two in this house here. And also with Neptune here, daydreaming, and again, desiring a more creative life, like wanting more creativity within the context of your daily routine. And yeah, with Saturn here, major capability in tasks, and not only effort put into the daily routine, but also into refining the skills that you have. So this can be a really helpful alignment. It's just that it's not really lighthearted in how it comes through. So let us look at Jupiter and Mars this year. Mars is going through a big, dramatic retrograde period this year. So for pretty much the first half of the year, we're dealing with Mars in retrograde and then moving through the shadow of that retrograde. Now, Mars only goes retrograde every 2 years or so. It's the least frequent retrograde, but when it does, it is a whole epic ordeal. So typically, Mars will last about a month, maybe a little bit more, sometimes even a little bit less in a given sign its retrograde period crosses just a small area. It's from, for instance, this time 6 degrees of Leo to 17 degrees of Cancer. And it's doing that for 8 months, pretty much. So it's just a whole ordeal. So we're going to be dealing with Mars in these places of our chart in a very overt way. This is something that we kind of can't dodge. So from January through the very, very end of April, pretty much into May, what you're dealing with is Mars in your ninth house of, again, higher learning, travel, spirituality, your worldview. And there's likely to be issues that arise there. Now, this can be a motivating factor too, and it can infuse some energy into those areas. So even when Mars is retrograde, not all bad. We can find ways to utilize it, but it tends to bring in challenges and conflicts, complications, things that irritate us, even accidents and injuries and things like this. So with this playing out in your ninth house, I would be careful if you're traveling, straight up. I would recommend trying to avoid arguments that are philosophical in nature. Those are likely to snowball with Mars there. But this can also then play out as a bit of a crisis of faith or a challenge to your worldview that arises. So I wouldn't worry about it too much. And also, when it comes to travel, if you have any control over that, I would actually avoid it while Mars is there. So I would aim for the latter half of the year because of the way that we have this alignment here. So what's nice about the way that this is playing out is that, yes, January through May, Mars is going to be in this ninth house of yours, but about the second week of June, we then have Jupiter moving into your ninth house, and that cleans up really well the mess that Mars has made here. And rather than a complication, then we get a lot of benefit, even fortune along these lines. So we could find that you, through even potentially a crisis that Mars has brought to this area, or otherwise just developing your spiritual outlook, developing your philosophy, developing your worldview. This is also very likely to have you quite open-minded when it comes to differences of opinion with Jupiter in your ninth house. This also brings positive travel experiences and more opportunities for exploration, but it also is pretty protective. So again, if you're traveling, I would aim for the time frame where Jupiter is in this house, which will be June 25 through June 26, rather than when Mars is in this place. Additionally, the ninth house, as it leads into the 10th, indicates that that which is underlying the career, that which is underlying the life direction is improving. And so think of it along these lines. It's our philosophy, it is our education, it's what we've learned, it's what we've studied that wind up feeding into our career. We tend to choose that based on our values, but then we also pursue studies and training and learning along those lines. So it's those underlying factors that are improved by Jupiter moving into this house as well. Additionally, if you are at all interested in publishing, this is a really wonderful influence to have when you're putting creative works out into the world, especially if they're very expressive. And education itself, very likely to go quite well, to be very beneficial to you, for you to understand things very easily, for teachers to be very kind and helpful, and also for those studies to be very productive and helpful to you long term. This can also just generally bring a sense of positivity to your philosophy, your worldview. So you could be seeing the world as a less kind of daunting place as Jupiter is here, and to want to improve the world and society and so forth, probably through ideas. Now, when Mars moves into your 10th house, Then what we're dealing with is Mars is direct at that point, but it's going pretty slowly because it's still catching up speed and it's still partially in that shadow of the retrograde. So there could be then in the May, June timeframe, some issues that arise within the career and specifically then your life direction, your purpose, your public standing, your reputation. So I would, again, try not to add any fuel to that fire. And usually the way that we do this with Mars is through frustration or conflict, bickering, shortcuts, things like that. So fortunately, this will then be moving on after not too terribly long, but it's something to watch for where there could then be some complications that wind up moving into the career area. Now, as for the eclipses this year, we have the nodal axis has just moved from Aries into Pisces this year. The nodal axis always moves retrograde, so it moves clockwise along the wheel. The planets and everything else, the standard direction is counterclockwise. So this moves from Aries into Pisces this year. And what the nodal axis is that so throughout the year, the sun will be directed more toward the northern hemisphere, more toward the southern hemisphere. And of course, that's our year, that's our seasons. So the moon does that each month. And there's a specific point at which those two cross. And it crosses it twice because it crosses on either side. And that's the nodal axis, is where those two cross. And that's why we get eclipses, because then what we have is the path of the moon and the path of the sun relative to Earth align perfectly. So that's why we get the sun blocked by the moon and the sun's light blocked by the Earth during a full moon. So new moons and full moons, the closer that they align with the nodal axis, the more total that the eclipse will be. And they need to be within a certain range of these to catch any eclipse at all. So, of course, we typically have 2 eclipses, a solar eclipse and a lunar eclipse in each season. And with the north node in Pisces and the south node in Virgo, we will be receiving eclipses around Pisces season, February, March, and Virgo season, August, September. Now, this year, because of the fact that we have the nodal axis still pretty close to the edge of this sign boundary here, we're actually not getting a Pisces solar eclipse. In the spring of 25, on March 29th, we're getting a solar eclipse in Aries. And so that first solar eclipse is going to be pushing us to take things a little bit less seriously. Now, you could work on your routine and so on and so forth. But again, I feel that because of the fact that that axis is moving into Pisces, it's wrapping up this Aries area of your 6th house. So learning to have fun outside of the routine and gaining some closure on a health concern, potentially developing a health regimen to take you forward, to kind of close out the eclipse series that we've been dealing with in Aries in your 6th house there. Now, otherwise, for the next year and a half or so, in the spring and the autumn, we'll be having these eclipses in your 5th house and your 11th house. So this is pretty nice. I would expect some really profound experiences since we have the North Node in your 5th house around positive, fun experiences. They're likely to be of greater significance to you. You're also oriented toward that, to have more fun. Additionally, to develop more creative endeavors. So those creative outlets of yours, any sort of art or expressive hobbies that you undertake, or the more expressive aspects of your career, this is an orientation toward that, to double down on that, to develop that, to mature along those lines. Additionally, if you have children or there are children around, there can be some very important experiences with them, potentially even changes within them if they're your own children. So they could be reaching new levels of maturity, and that could be fascinating for you to witness. Now, additionally, with the South Node, this is an area in which we're asked not to over rely and even to release in order to develop further. And with that playing out in your 11th house of friends and allies, networking, social groups, things like this, there could be a closing out of or growing apart from some, some friends or allies, some group. You may feel the need to step away from that because you may feel that you have grown apart from that, or from your perspective, you could certainly feel like you have outgrown something like that. But along this axis of the fifth house, again, your creativity, your self expression, hobbies, interests, things that you enjoy, and the friendship groups and the other groups that we involve ourselves with, you're likely to have some pretty positive experiences. These are really wonderful houses, and it's bringing a level of profundity to these areas. So again, positive friendships, positive romantic relationships as well, with the North Node in the fifth house, that are based on interests, that are based on mutual enjoyment of each other. So likely some really good connections with other people. And again, that may also result in you realizing that there are some friends, some groups, some colleagues that you're growing away from. Also, if there are any hobbies or interests or creative outlets, things like this, that you've been potentially interested in, but that you haven't quite pursued yet, this is asking you to pursue that. Additionally, if you feel like engaging in any aid or help around topics of children, because we have that overlap of Pisces fifth house here, you could also be being oriented toward that as well, and would be likely to grow a lot through that. The eclipses bring in opportunities for us to grow. Sometimes it's fun. I think for you, you're going to have some pretty decent eclipse experiences because you can't go too terribly wrong with these houses, but they are substantial events that contribute to our growth and our maturation. But yeah, I think that is pretty much what I have for you, Scorpio. So, with all of that said, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And again, if you want to go into this in more detail, do feel free to book a personal reading. I would love to look into how all of these transits are playing out in your own individual chart. And again, if you don't mind hitting the thumbs up button, greatly, greatly, greatly appreciate that. And feel free to subscribe for future videos. I would love to have you here. And yeah, other than all of that, I again hope you have an absolutely beautiful year. And I will talk to you all soon. Be good. Bye.